The Sikha we will be learning this week is a Sikha for Chamishos Ba'ov, and look at the Sikha's Chelik Chov Dalet. It talks about Chamishos Ba'ov, the Yontiv, the special Yontiv of the 15th day of Av. So the Rebbe says like this: if then was the Mishnah Zokt, and this that the Mishnah says in Masechta Tainis, and this is towards the end of Masechta Tainis, and by the way, the Sikha is also a Siyum, a Hadran, on Masechta Tainis. So on this that the Mishnah says in Masechta Tainis, there were no Yomim Tevim by Yidden as great as Chamishos B'Av, the 15th day of Av, as in Kippur. Bring the Gemara Kama Taimim from Amiroyim of the Yontif and Tesvav B'Av. So the Gemara brings many reasons from Amiroyim for this day being a Yontif. What is the Yontif of this day? And the Rebbe quotes the different reasons brought down. One thing is Yom Shehut Shvat Melav Zebezeh. It's a day that they allowed the Shvatim to intermarry, because we know, if you remember from Chumash, it says that the Bnei Slavcha came and said that they want a Nachla in Eretz Yisrael, and the Rebbe said they will get their father's Nachla. And then they came and asked that when they're going to marry people from other Shvatim, and then the Nachla will go to the husband, and then the children will yarshin, and the children are from other shvatim that will take away nachla from their shevet to the other shevet. So David just said, Takya, you only could marry somebody from your shevet. In order for not to make that the nachla, the inheritance of Eretz Yisrael, should transfer from one shevet to another. But then it came later on a day when they were matir it. They found the reason, and they were matir this union of intermarrying with another shevet. And that heter happened on the day of Chamishos B'Av. And that's a yontif. And the Rebbe in the Sikha will explain what the yontif is behind it. Another thing, Yom Shehut Shevet B'Yamin Lovi B'Kol, a day that they allowed Shevet B'Yamin to marry with Yidden, because there was a whole civil war in Eretz Yisrael, and they killed most of members of Shevet B'Yamin, and they were made also a din that you're not allowed to marry with anybody from Shevet B'Yamin. And then they took off, they were matir that din, they were matir Shevet B'Yamin to intermarry with other Yidden in order for the Shevet to be able to continue, and that heter happened on the day of Chamishos B'Av, and that's a great thing that happened. Another thing, Yom Shekola B'Meisa Midbar, the day that the people who died in the Midbar finished dying, which means like this: after the story with the Meraglim, which took place at Tisha B'Av, and the Eibishter said, Yidden are going to stay in the desert for 40 years, but throughout the 40 years, people are going to die. And the Seder was that every year on Tisha B'Av, those people who became 60 years old would dig their own graves, and they would go in, and they would die there. Next year, the people who became 60 that year. The last year, people who were 60 then made their graves, and they went in. Came the end of the day of Tisha B'Av, they saw they're alive. So they thought to themselves, maybe they miscalculated. So they thought maybe it wasn't the right date. So maybe tonight is Chamishos B'Av, is Tisha B'Av. So they went in again, and again they came out alive. They did this a few nights, till the night of Chamishos B'Av. That's a full moon. So when it came then and they saw a full moon, they knew that this is not a mistake in the calculation. Elamai, the Eibishter already stopped the decree. So we see on Chamishos B'Av, that's when the Mesa Midbar people who were dying throughout the years in the Midbar stopped dying. Another thing that happened on Chamishos B'Av, Yom Shebit L'Sheba Nola Pasudiyis, Trusdi Yesheheshev Yerova Ben Avot Al Adrochem Sheliyalu Yisrael L'Regel. Yerova Ben Avot made blockades that Yidden shouldn't be able to go to Yerushalayim, to the Beis HaMikdash, for the mitzvah Aliyah L'Regel. It's a mitzvah that every Yontiv Yidden have to come, all Yidden have to come to Yerushalayim for Yontiv, and he blocked it. So later years, Heshea Ben Olo took away these blockades. And when did it happen? It happened on Chamishos B'Av. Another thing, Yom Shenitnu Haruge Beter L'Kvura, the day that the people who got killed in Beter were able to be buried. Beter was a very big city, and they rebelled against the Goyim, and finally they killed them all. It's a terrible thing. Not only that, they wouldn't even let them bury them. And they stayed from it quite a few years without being buried. And on Chamishos B'Av, in 1 year, the Goyim allowed the Yidden to be buried. And the truth is, the bodies all stayed intact, even though there were quite a few years in between. And the day that they were allowed to be buried was Chamishos B'Av. So those are all different reasons why Chamishos B'Av is a yontif. And some sof bring the Gemara, and at the end the Gemara brings another reason why Chamishos B'Av is a yontif. Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef, they both say this is Yom Shaposku Melichres Eitzim Lamarocha. It's the day that they stopped, every year they stopped cutting wood for the Mizbeach. The Mizbeach, where they would burn the karbonos, needed wood. That was the fuel. So they had to chop wood. So they chopped wood, as we'll see later, from the month of Nisan. They started, and they went down till Chamishas B'Av. Chamishas was the last day. From then on, they didn't chop any wood. And the reason why they didn't is, as the Gemara will say, the Tanya, it says in the Brisa that Rabbi Eliezer HaGodel says, from the 15th day of Av and on, the sun is not as strong. And so from then on, they did not chop wood for the marocha, for the mizbeach. Why? Since the sun is not so strong, so they don't get so dry. And if they don't get so dry, it could get worms. And the wood were not allowed to be wormy. So they only cut the wood at the time when the sun was strong, so it was made it very dry and there was no worms there. From Chamishas B'Av, since the sun became weaker, the wood is not so dry, so they couldn't chop anymore. So they stopped chopping wood for the marocha on that day. And that's the reason why that's a special day, because that's the day that they stopped chopping the wood for the Mizbeach. And Omer Reb Nashe even added, the Korule Yem Taver Magal, and they called it the day that the sickle, like the axe, was broken. That's what they called it. And the Rebbe will go into what it means exactly, as he'll say later. Some say it means it's only a Shema Mushal, it's only a borrowed term. That means it's a day they stopped using the axe, they stopped cutting it. And another pshat is that they actually broke the sickles, they broke the axes that they used to chop the wood, they broke it on this day, because from then on they wouldn't use it anymore. So these are all the reasons that the Gemara says. So the Rebbe continues, by the Allah, all earlier first reason that we said is verstandig for was der Tag is angenommen geworden als a Yontiv. We understand why this is the reason for the day to be a Yontiv. Because it's a day that something good happened, something beneficial for the Yidden happened. And he uses the example, the Beetle of Hefsek von Agzeir Veinish, the day that stopped a punishment, stopped a decree, like Yem Shekol B'Meisa Midbar, the day that the people who died in the Midbar stop dying, the people who died throughout the years stop dying. That's something very good. In the order 6, the Rebbe says that he quotes from Rashi and Tainus in the Rashbam, where it says, they made into a yontif that time when they stopped dying, they realized they stopped dying, so they made it into a yontif. So we understand why that's the reason for the day being a yontif. Other thing, the day that Hesheya was mavatal, this blockade that Rov and Avot made that they shouldn't be able to go to Alil Regel, something good. It took away Exeira. The day that the people who died in Better, were killed in Better, were able to be buried, it's a good thing that they allow them to be buried. So these are things which are things that Exeira, a punishment, was taken away. That's the reason for being a Yontif. Some other reasons is not that it's taking away a punishment, but it fills something that's missing. The day that the Shvatim were allowed to marry each other, intermarry. So there was a chesaron before, there was something lacking, something not available, and now something became available. Oh, that's also good. Or the day that they allowed Sheva B'Yamin to marry Yidden from the other Shvatim. Also, till now, there was a problem, they couldn't marry, and now that chesaron is taken away. These are all good things that happened. And these are reasons for this day that this happened to become a yontif. But concerning the last reason, which is Yem Sheposku, the day that they stopped cutting the wood, chopping the wood for the Mizbeach, we have to understand. What's the Meile? What's the special thing? What's so good about the fact that they stopped chopping wood for the Mizbeach? Was to them, so their tog sein a yontif, because of that, the day shall be a yontif. Und der Zunach a yontif Godel, not only a yontif, it's a big yontif, was loy hoy yom tevin ketesva bob, can you make a put in? The Gemara the Mishnah uses a lotion. It was such a big yontif. No other yontif was as great as this yontif. Like Chamishas B'Av Yom Kippur. But Yom Kippur is nothing here to our discussion. But Chamishas B'Av became such a big yontif, and these are the reasons. So what is so good about stopping chopping wood for the Mizbeach? It became not stam a yontif, a big yontif, the biggest yontif. the day that they stopped doing something for the benefit of the Beis Hamikdash, that becomes a yontif. It's good to chop the wood for the Mizbeach, for the Beis Hamikdash. When they stopped it, it's not such a good thing. Why is the fact that they stopped doing something for the benefit of the Beis Hamikdash, that should turn into yontif? And at the end, Reb Menashe even added that that they stopped cutting the wood for the Mizbeach, for the Marocha of the Mizbeach, is such a big thing. They even gave it a special name for that. They called this day with a special name, the day of the breaking of the axe or the sickle. What's so good about it? And he says they even gave it a special name based on this reason. The Kmi is noch starker. The question is even greater. Like the Rebbe Elazar HaGadol, Ados was according to Rebbe Elazar HaGadol, the reason why they stopped that day cutting the wood for the Marocha is because the sun became weaker. In other words, the reason they stopped cutting wood is because there became a weakness, a chesoron in something that's good in nature. Was bring tatielis. Something that's good, the sun, when the sun is strong, it's good. And it brings benefit. And you need the sun to be strong in order to be able to chop the wood for the marocha. And the reason it stopped chopping because this good thing that the sun gave is stopping. So we're making a big deal and a big yontif because of something negative, so to speak, that happened. There's a weakness in something good. That's the reason for the day becoming a yontif. Well, for them was the time yem sheposkem lichas eitzim is a das Rabbi, and from this reason that it's because they stopped chopping the wood on that day for the mizbeach for the marocha is an opinion that came from more than one person. Because who said this? Rabbi and Rav Yosef. They both gave this reason. And then you also have Reb Menashe. Reb Menashe added that this day is called Yom Taver Magel, is behemshech to the idea that they stopped chopping the wood that day. So obviously he also agrees with the reason that this is the reason for the yontif. So this is a reason given by Rabbi, like basically three people. Not with the time is not like the other reasons that we mentioned before, but the other time is a das yochid. Each one is a reason of an individual. And the Rebbe in the Orah says that when the Gemara brings something in someone else's name, obviously they also agree to it. So the other reasons are brought by one person, the name of somebody else. So the Chur, it's also more than one. But the Rebbe says even though it's more than one, but it's here it's three. It's even more than that. It's three. Here's, as we said before, Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef and Reb Menashe. So the fact that this was said by more people is mashme, seems as there is a tamikri. That this is a main reason if there's simcha v'yontif v'chamishoser ba'ov for the simcha and the yontif of this 15th day of Av. Al koponim mer from the other time more than the other reasons. Chochas kol hanach hameroy lepligi elamar omer lepligi elamar gomer haimerabe mar gomer haimerabe. Even though each Ameiro who said his reason is not arguing on the other reasons. It's the Lashon that's brought down from the Rashbam. He says each one just gave the reason that he heard from his Rebbe. One heard this reason, one heard other reason, but all the reasons are true. But nevertheless, they were all said by one person or by two people, while this reason was said by three people. So as mashma that this is the more important reason for the day being a yontif. And in order 11, the Rebbe says this would be a little bit to the klal that we know that when we have different opinions in Gemara and we want to know what the halacha is like, so when the Gemara goes on into a discussion and explaining a certain reason and going into questions and answers, the Shakla V'Tarya, the fact that the Gemara goes into a discussion concerning one of the opinions is a raya that the halacha is like that opinion. The same thing here also, that the fact that there are more people involved in this reason is mashma that this is the more important reason. So this makes this question even greater. The question was, why is this a reason b'chlal? What's so good about it? Why is this a reason to be a yontif? The fact that they stopped cutting the wood for the marocha, that's what I've explained. And not only that, it seems like this is the main reason. Why would this be a reason b'chlal for Chamishos being a yontif? But then the Rebbe goes on that there are other Rishonim who do bring reasons, explanations for this. Rabbeinu Gershon bePirusha, Rabbeinu Gershon in his commentary, Zog, he says like this: as the specialty of the fact that they stopped cutting the wood for the Marocha is because when they were involved to chop wood for the Marocha, they couldn't learn Torah. So they were bottled. There was take away time from learning. That day they stopped cutting. But so Yontif, they made into Yontif. Now they could learn more Torah. Now they could develop learning Torah. So the Yontif is not for the fact that they stopped cutting the wood. The Yontif is that because they stopped cutting the wood, b'meile, they were able to learn more Torah. So according to what he says, we understand the specialty of the day that they stopped cutting wood for the Maracha. That's why they made it a Yontif, because the Yontif is because they're able to learn more. The Rashbam gives a different reason. The day that they stopped cutting the wood, they were happy. Because that's the day that they finished such a great mitzvah. Which means, as the Ma'ila v'simcha from Hefse Krisis Eitzim, the big greatness and the simcha that's in stopping to cut the wood is verbunden damit, it's connected to this, because then the mitzvah of cutting the wood for the Mizbeach came to its completion. That's when the mitzvah came to its shleimus. Like we found the concept of simcha when you finish another mitzvah, like when you make a siyum on a mesechta, you make a yontif, you make a simcha, you make a suda. Why? Because now you completed something, you completed a mitzvah. The same thing here also, they completed that day was the end, the completion of the mitzvah of cutting wood for the Mizbeach. And the Rebbe brings in order 19, he brings from the Mukayesa where it says, the Gam Sheminik, the Smeach Binya mitzvah, is a minik to be happy when you do a mitzvah. That the day you finish, you make it into Yontif. And he brings for the Korban Eida also says the same Lashon on Yerushalmi. They were happy for finishing the mitzvah, meaning not happy that you finished and you're over with it. You're happy that now you have a complete mitzvah, you finished a complete mitzvah. And he brings from the Teis Yontif where he says, since they finished now the work for Hashem, they made it a kederech. Like you make a party when you finish Inyan and Torah, you finish a Masechta. And then he brings the Yam Shloime from the Marshal in Babakame that he says brings a raya from the fact that Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef would make a simcha and a suda when they finish the Masechta. So all that we see that there's an inyan in making a special day, a special yontav, a simcha, when you finish a mitzvah. The same thing here also. This is the end of this mitzvah. They finished the mitzvah on Chamishos Abba because that's when they stopped the cutting. So the mitzvah of cutting the wood was finished. Und es ist verstandig, was der Rashbam will nicht lernen wie Rabbi Negation. The Rebbe says, we understand, it's self-understood why the Rashbam does not learn like Rabbi Negation. Rabbi Negation learned a different thing. He said because since they stopped cutting the wood, they were able to learn more Torah. So the simcha is that now they're able to learn Torah. But the Rashbam obviously doesn't accept it. And the Rebbe says, I understand why. Why? Because according to Rabbi Negation is number one, the main nekuda, the main point is missing in the Gemara. The fact that from now on they were able to learn more Torah, that's not mentioned in the words of Rabbi. In other words, Rabbi just says, it's the day they stopped cutting the wood. The main thing is not that. The main thing they started learning more. So that is not mentioned in the Gemara. So the ikir of the svara, the way that Rabbi Negersha learns, is missing in the Gemara. Now you could say that right after this, in Hemsha, the Gemara talks about starting to learn more from Chamishos Abov. The Gemara says that anybody, since the nights are starting to get longer, you're able to utilize the nights into learning. So from Chamishos Abov, you have to add more learning at night. So you could say that's what it means. After it says that it's the day they stop cutting the wood for the Marocha, and then the Gemara says you have to learn more from Chamishos Abov. So maybe it's hinted in the fact that the Gemara continues that you have to start learning more from Chamishos Abov at night, is a continuation to what he said before, that you stop cutting the wood. But the Rebbe said it's not hinted, that the reason is because they started learning more. Maybe you could say it's because what was written later that you should learn more is the pshat. So the Rebbe says no. When the Gemara continues that from now on, whoever adds to learning Torah, adds life to himself, that's not a continuation of before. That's an additional saying. It's just like something that the Gemara tells us what to do. but it's not said as a reason why the yontif of stopping to cut the wood. Und Bechlal Madgish need the Metzeminyan. And it became 10 places and the Bechlal, this that the Gemara says that from now on you should add is not to tell you that you have to learn more, just not tells you that now you can learn more, have to learn more. Nor ask from them talk is amazing. From now on you should start learning more at night because the night is longer. So it's not even talking about that from now on you can learn more Torah. But those is Shaykh Salman, this inyan the Shaykh is to everybody. When need dafke to the Kirsa and this is Shaykh is to everybody, not only to those who cut the wood. This is a lesson for every Yid that from Chamishos above you have to continue learning more. If it would be a hemshech to what I said before, that that's the day they stop cutting the wood, maybe they can learn more. So it should be something connected to the people who used to chop the wood. They're the ones that are able to learn more. That's not what it says. It says every Yid from now on should learn more. So it's shaykhs to everybody. You need dafka to the Kirsa and not only to those that cut the wood. Befrat das Christus mistam the other arbet geton geworden nit baleilas. And especially that probably makes sense that those that chop the wood did not do it at night. Like everybody, these things you don't work at night. So it has nothing to do with them, especially. So in this case, what we're talking, if we're going to say that this is a connection to those that chopped wood couldn't learn so much, and now they're learning more, but we're talking about learning at night. And they could have learned at night anyway before too, because they chopped the wood only during the day. So it's not saying anything to them. It's just saying a close the keirod that you have to start learning more. Mela, you can't say that this that the Gemara says that you have to start learning more is a continuation and explains the reason why the yontif of stopping to cut the wood is a yontif, because they learn more. That statement has nothing to do with this. And the second thing is nit mistaber am so kevez an yontif was aruz bringen nach hasoden der mitzvah pula from Christus heitzim marocha. According to that pshat, according to Ben Gershon, that the ikir is because now they started learning more. Now everyone agrees that cut wood for a marocha is a mitzvah. So we're saying now we're stressing the point that we're able to learn more, and brings this and making that day into a yontif brings out the chesodin in doing the mitzvah of chopping the wood. That's what we're saying. It's bringing out the chesodin. Wait this day a yontif because now we don't have the problem of cutting the wood, because till now was a problem you couldn't learn, and now the problem is over. So we're considering, according to this reason, the cutting the wood for the mizbeach as a shtickle problem. It's a chesodin. Would they make a yontif of a day which expresses a chesodin in doing a mitzvah? Even though we're saying there's a bigger mitzvah that from now on you could learn Torah if it's even bigger. But it brings out a chesodin in the previous mitzvah. It doesn't make sense that you should make a yontif out of something that brings out a chesodin in the mitzvah. So Mele, Rashbam does not learn a negation. But the Rashbam's reason seems to be a good reason. That the yontif was that it's a siyum. It's the finishing, the completion of a mitzvah, of the mitzvah of cutting the wood. That's why it's a yontif. But the Rebbe says, but even that we have to understand. With Loshem mitzvah gdeila, the Rashbam says that the reason that it was a yontif because they finished this big mitzvah. When the Rashbam uses a big, why does he say it's a big mitzvah? He should have said they finished the mitzvah. Is the Rashbam bepasht as ruisen zum Masbe sein vervos chamish oser ba'ov is nit stam a yontif nor leho yom tevel Yisrael. The reason it says the mitzvah gdeila is trying to explain how this is a reason why they made Chamishoser Ba'ov into a special yontif. That it's Lehoy Yom Tevim Yisrael. There was no yontif like that. The air, like Chamishoser and Yom Kippur. A yontif Godel Yuchad. It's a special yontif. So in order to explain, so the Rashbam uses a lotion that this was a siyum, the completion of a big mitzvah. Of a mele, the yontif that we made from this siyum is a big yontif. But the question is, sort of, we have to understand, why is cutting the wood for the marocha such a big mitzvah? Not stama, it's a mitzvah. What makes it such a special mitzvah? The contrary. It doesn't seem like it's a mitzvah b'chlal. It's a preparation for a mitzvah. To prepare in the lishke, in that chamber where they had the wood, enough wood that you should be able to use it for the marocha to bring karbonas on the mizbeach. It's not a mitzvah in itself. It's called a hechsher mitzvah. Hechsher mitzvah means l'moshel. To cut off a nesek from the tree. It's a mitzvah, it's no mitzvah. But you can't have a nesek to use it on sukkahs unless you cut it off the tree. So cutting off the tree, the esek is not a mitzvah. Same thing, it's not a mitzvah. The Rashbam says it's a mitzvah gdeila. He says, why is it a mitzvah gdeila? Number one. And besides that, it's not even such a real mitzvah. It's a hechsher mitzvah. So why is it so special? Obifrat as afila by Gemar von a mitzvah mamish, see ma Torah, especially that when you make an end, when you complete a real mitzvah, mamish, like for instance, you finish the Torah, finish a Masechta, you finish the Torah, Simchas Torah. You find in the Loshna, das as man von Simchas Day Levi Yontev, Shalei Hoy Yom Tevim Kameya. We don't find that such a Loshna, that there's such a Yontev. There was no other Yontev like it. And there you mamish finishing, completing a mitzvah. And here it's not even completing a mitzvah. So the shaila is even that according to Rashbam, that the reason is, why is this a yontav, that they stopped cutting the wood, is because now they finished the mitzvah. But why is it a reason to be such a special day that more than any other yontav we have? Then the Rebbe continues. In Divrei Reb Menashe, the Korah L'Yom Tomer Magel, in the words of Reb Menashe, who said that they called that day the day of Taver Magel, you find also two pirushim. Two pshatim, what is it? And I mentioned it in the beginning, but here the Rebbe talks about it. What does that mean? Tosfos is mafarish. Tosfos explains, what it meant is not that they actually broke the sickle, they broke the axe. It's an expression. They didn't use it anymore. They stopped using it. Rabbi Gershon says the same thing. From now on, you don't need this axe, this sickle to cut the wood. That's what it means. But not that it means actually they broke it. So what they call the day, Yom Taver Magel, the day of breaking of the axe, it's only an expression. The Rashbam says different. He says, Shenishberu HaKardumes. The axes were broken. Because we don't need them anymore to chop wood, because there's no more chopping wood from now on. But some Pashat L'Shein is mashman, the simple words of the Rashbam seems, the Shem Taver Magel meant that this name, that it was Taver Magel, means not nor arus to bring in amadaf manit cases on eitzibit magel. Not only to bring out that you don't need a magel anymore, you don't need the axe anymore to chop the wood, because we stopped chopping the wood. No kipshut, it means kipshut mahot so broch on the magel, they broke the axe. When I say sich mashman from Rasha, was his mafara shviras hagarzen from Rasha seems that way too. He says shviras hagarzen, breaking the axe. Und der Hecherich of them Pirish and Gemara is movement pashtas. And it seems very simple that why the Rashbam and Rasha learned that way, because that fits to the simple pshat in the Gemara. Neisev of them was the posher that touched for Tover Magel is neat bottle of their posak, but the shviras hakela. Besides the fact that if you look at the simple translation of the words, Tavar Magel doesn't mean it's not there anymore. They stopped using it. It means Tavar in Aramaic means broken. You break the scale, you actually break the axe. So that's besides the point why it seems why the Rashbam and Rasha learned that way. But the Rebbe gives another reason why they learned that way, not like Tosfos, that it's just an expression that they stopped using this axe. Because Leighton Pirish, as Yom Tover Magel, main blaze at Magel Uvget, so Ton de Pula from Christus Eitzim, according to the other pshat, that Taver Magel means that the day they stopped using the axe for cutting the wood, Kum Tuis as a Ramanashe is Mesig means a Zognas Korel Yom Taver Magel, like Divrei Rabbi Rabbi Yosef, Yem Sheposkum Alich Eitzim Al Rocha. So it comes out like this. What is Rav Nasha adding? Rav Nasha, they said that what's the yontiv? They stopped cutting the wood. Came Rav Nasha and added, they called it Yom Taver Magel. What's he adding? So according to the opinion of Tosfos and the others who learn that they didn't actually break the Magel, they just gave it the day a name. So what's Rav Nasha adding on what Rabbi Yosef said, that this is a yom sheposkum alichas eitzim malacha, the day they stopped chopping the wood. Need binyan. So he's not adding anything in it. There's nothing more that happened. Nor all he added was that their talk is on Yeruf and Al Shemse, that the name is called because of this. So it's nothing changed. There's nothing that was done. According to the pshat that they actually broke, he's adding that there's another thing they done. Not only they stopped chopping the wood, they actually did something else. They broke the magel. So it's an addition. But according to the taste of Shad, they didn't do anything more. It just said they gave it a name. So that's one thing that's striking. What's so special about it? So they gave it a name. Why is that such a special thing? And the Eidike, another thing that's the more important thing, in the Minyan from Tavar Magel, in this Inyan, that all the Tavar Magel means that they stopped using it to chop, they stopped chopping the wood, because of the Togni Tuzgitil from the Allah under Allah Weiterdiketeg. So this day, Chamishos is not different than the days after. The fact that they didn't use the axe to chop wood, continued till they started again, which is in the month of Nisan. And the Rebbe brings the order 33 that Rashbam says it came from Nisan. So why is that day special? Mele, according to Rashi, according to Rashbam and Rashi, that day they broke the magal. Yes, so that's something on that day. They broke the magal on that day. They broke the axe on that day. But according to them, that they just stopped and they didn't chop any more wood. That they did Chamishoserbov and Tezayinov and Yud Zayinov. They did all the way till they started again, till Nisan. So there's nothing special in that day. And where you want to give reasons why this day is special. So the reason is they stopped cutting the wood. Comes Rabbi Menashe and adds, what does he add? That they called the game Tavar Magal, meaning it's the day they stopped, the day they didn't use it. That's not that day. That's the day, all the days afterwards they did. The Rebbe learned the Rashbam, that's what the Rashbam learns, as dos meint Schapiro hakardumes. That means that the axe were broken. Und das is Rabbi Menashe Meisiv. That's exactly what Rabbi Menashe tries to add. As nit nor lohekesh the meitzim marocha. Not only that they didn't chop wood for the marocha, nor tover magel. That them tog is subrochen given their magel. That the day they actually the magel the axe the sickle was broken. In which they chopped the wood. So the pshat of the Rashbam makes sense according to the Yonim that the Rebbe explained. But we have to understand. So he has a raya from the Lashon of the Gemara, etc., that it means they broke the axe. So what's so special about it? Because of that, the day had a special title, the day they broke the axe. The day is called. In other words, why would the day be called? Why is that special breaking? The fact that they stopped chopping the wood, we understand that's the completion of a mitzvah, so it's a yontev. But what's this? I say they broke that axe that day, so they broke it. What does that add? In which way does that add to the simcha or add to something that's there? Also, generally understand, they have to understand, not understood. Why did the kake have to break this axe? Why would they break it? Why would they break the axe? They won't use it, but why did they have to go break it? It's baltashe. To take something that's useful and just destroy it is an aveira baltashe. You're not allowed to do that. Das was man der Magel nicht gewollt nutzen auf andere Tashmische Chayil. The fact, the could say not stop chopping wood for the marocha, they could use it for other things. So the fact that they didn't want to use it for other regular secular things, you could explain that they didn't want to use it. Why? Since they used it before for holy matters, to cut the wood for the mizbeach. So they didn't want to use it for other secular things. That we understand. As is oben movement, but we don't understand why did they have to break it? But you can't even lose them for the crisis. They could have left it for next year. Next year they should use it to chop it. Why did they have to break it? That's the shaila of b'cholos. Why would they break it? Besides batashchis, what was the purpose? You could have kept it and used it next year. So in order 36, the Rebbe says that you could say it wouldn't be right to keep it for next year because it's such a long time from Chamshos above till Nisan, and it gets spoiled, and you have to redo it, you have to fix it. So, and in the Bisamigdash, there's a klal is they didn't fix kalim. If kalim became useless, they brought new ones. So here also, to use it for next year, definitely it wouldn't stay as good as it is, and that's what they didn't want. So that you could say, but the Rebbe says still, why break it? Could say the question the Pnim was, why didn't they leave it for next year? But you could answer why they didn't want to leave it for next year, because it definitely wouldn't be the same. But still, what was the purpose of breaking it when you're even on Baltashkis? So what should you do with it? Why put it away someplace? Hide it, put it away like other things that they did put away. Why did they have to? There must be something special here in breaking the axe. The day became known as the day that they broke the axe. What's so special about that? So we have all these kashas. Rabbi says you could explain the shot like this. This that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said that there were no Yomim Tevim by Yidden like Chamishosar Ba'ov. Kum behemshech hakesim from the Divrei HaMishnah b'negei Tisha B'Av. That comes right after and as a end to what the Mishnah talks about Tisha B'Av. This is the day of mourning of the year. Was in Meshech Hashonos Nito Noch Hazah Yem Heipech Hasimcha Vayonte. We talk from Tisha B'Av. In the whole year, there's no other day no other day that's the opposite of Simcha and the opposite of Yontiv like the day of Tisha B'Av. So the day of Tisha B'Av is the greatest Avelis. The Kesher Lezeh is the Mishnah Mamshech Mesayim, and in connection to that, the Mishnah continues. The Inyan Teiv and the in a good thing, the opposite. Just like here, Tisha B'Av is the greatest day of mourning. So the Mishnah continues and says there is a day that's the greatest day of Simcha. As there was no day as a Yontif like Chamishos B'Av and Yom Kippur, which is not negated to our discussion in the Sikher, but that he wants us to say that Chamishos B'Av, the greatest day of Simcha versus the greatest day of Avelis. So it comes out that we have to figure out that Chamishos B'Av is not just a special day; it's a special day which is the other extreme of Tisha B'Av. But Bizarre is moving with Yomtik, so this explains and makes Gishmak as the time that the reasons why this Yomtiv is such a great Yomtiv, greater than any other Yomtiv, they must be things which are complete opposite of what happened on Tisha B'Av. So all the reasons, as the Rebbe will explain, are the opposite of what happened on Tisha B'Av, and that's why just like Tisha B'Av is the worst day, so to speak, the greatest sad day, so this thing which is the opposite is the greatest good day, day of Simcha. And the Rebbe is going to explain how these reasons that the Gemara gives are the opposite of what happened on Tisha B'Av. The Pashtas movement in the time, it's very simple to understand concerning the reason Yom Shekol Mesa Midbar. That the reason for Chamishos B'Av is because it's the day that people stop dying in the Midbar, which is the Bittul Akzeira Nitzarayim in Israel, which when they by doing that, the Gzeira of not entering into Israel but remaining in the desert, dying in the desert, was bottled when this stopped happening. So that's one thing which we understand why this is the opposite of Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av, when we were chased out of Eretz Israel, the Churban Beis Hamikdash. And Chamishos B'Av, we celebrate the day that they were ready to go into Eretz Israel. The Mesa Midbar stopped. The other thing, the reason is because the people that were killed in Beter were able to be buried. So this is also something which is the opposite of Tisha B'Av. Both of them was Zeine Benigud und the Tikkun to the Tzvei Yonim. These two things, the fact that this people stopped dying in the Midbar, and the day that Harugi Beter were able to be buried, are the opposite, and the Tikkun, which is the fixing to the Tzvei Yonim, to these Tzvei Yonim that happened at Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av nigzer ala v'sein sheli konsum orders. Tisha B'Av what Eibishter made Gzeira that Yidden should enter Yisrael, because the Meraglim came, when they came back, it was Tisha B'Av, and it says the Yidden cried that night, and the Eibishter said, now you're crying for no reason, because what's the reason? You're going to go into Yisrael, you could go in. What I'll do is this will become, because of that, a B'chia L'Deis. Later generations, you're going to cry on this day when there will be Churban Beis Hamikdash. So when the inyan of dying in the Midbar, which was concept of not entering Eretz Yisrael, stopped, that's really the opposite of Tisha B'Av having a Gzeira not to go to Eretz Yisrael. So one of the things of Tisha B'Av is that there was a Gzeira not to go to Eretz Yisrael, and that's the reason it's a sad day. So the Simcha of being ready to go to Eretz Yisrael is the complete opposite. And the same thing it says, Tisha B'Av nilket the better. And Tisha B'Av, one of the reasons for the fast of Tisha B'Av, why it's a sad day, is because the city of Beter, which is a main city with millions of people, was conquered by the Goyim. So when the Harugi Beter were eventually able to be buried, is the opposite of them conquering Beter. So Amela, these two reasons of amongst all the reasons that were given for Chamishos B'Av are mamish the opposite of what Tisha B'Av. So it makes sense in the Mishnah. First, as the Mishnah speaks about Tisha B'Av, which is the worst day of the saddest day of the year, and because of certain these things that happened, so on Chamishos B'Av was the opposite. It's a big simcha because the opposite happened. That's concerning these reasons. When Negeya, the under time, what about the other reasons of why Chamishos B'Av is such a yontev? How are they the opposite of what is Tisha B'Av? So the Rebbe explains like this: the Ershte Tam, the first reason, first inyan, what the Gemara brings is that the Gemara brings is Yem Shut Shvatim Lo B'Zeh B'Zeh, the day that the Shvatim were allowed to intermarry. Till then, there was a din that they can't intermarry into another Shevet, and this day it stopped. So Ge'endik, what happened was really it's finished. They're upheld from the Sis of Nachlam Matel Matacher. that day stopped this idea that the inheritance of one Shevet will never be able to go to another Shevet. That was the whole thing. They were afraid if they married people, other Shvatim, and it'll go to other Shevet, so then part of the share of one Shevet will go to the other Shevet. And the Eibusher said, you can't do that. And that stopped when the day they allowed them to intermarry into other Shvatim. This idea that you cannot, that something of yours, that's your, and you're part of one Shevet, cannot go to another Shevet changed. But the roof in them was Hutru, Hulu. So what's so special about that? Why is that such a yontif? Why is that such a special day? The uftu, the specialty is, bringt an Ilui Meilen the Knisse vis Yashris Boretz, and the Faras yontif. That also is part of showing how entering Eretz Yisrael is done completely. It's part of the union of entering Eretz Yisrael, as Rabbi will explain in a second. But since it's part of entering Eretz Yisrael, so we understand why it's the opposite of Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av, which is Eretz Yisrael, and this is something that happened that is the opposite, a good thing that happened that made the entrance of Eretz Yisrael and owning Eretz Yisrael to a fullest degree. How? The explanation is like this. As long as there was an Isser, you can't take from one Nachla, from one, the inheritance, the share that belonged to one Shevet to come to another Shevet. Every share of Eretz Yisrael, every part of Eretz Yisrael had to stay with that Shevet that was given to. So that's the problem. That's what the din that the Eibusher made then. He's been negated to them chaylik given. So as long as you were not allowed to give it to another shevet, couldn't go to another shevet, means that concerning that chaylik, even the chaylik that Yid got, in nigiven can buy l'shlema. You did not own it completely. What's shot owning something completely? Owning something that's mine means it's complete. I could do what I want with it. If there is a restriction that there are certain things I can't do with it, I have no right to do with it, then as much as it's mine, there's something lacking. It's not 100% mine. You can't even get an under shevet. In this case, every shevet got their share, and they had no right to make it go to another shevet. That means there was a lack in the ownership. So at that point, you own it, but not 100%. You know, 99%. There's something you have no right to do with it. That's been the part that each one got. Besides that, the Rebbe adds another point. And also concerning not the share that you got, but the rest of Eretz Yisrael. Any person who got his share had no connection to the other parts of Eretz Yisrael. There's no even potential of you ever owning it. You have no connection to it whatsoever. Because something that you don't own, but there's some ways that if you want, somehow you could get it eventually. That means I have a certain right over it even now, a potential right. But if it's something I could never get, so I have no connection to it. So every person who got his share had no connection on the shares of the other Shvatim. Ain't a royal about it. It's not even fit that it should be, you should have an ownership. Yet the Shevet Gehat nor Zain Chelik Mesuim only had their Chelik. Kishabotle Isser, when that Isser came, the Eibusher said you could intermarry a male, so you might get. Every person has a potential ability of maybe getting a share from another shevet. Maybe he'll marry somebody from another shevet or whatever, and he'll get it. That moment, so both things happen here. Everyone, the chelik that he got became his completely. Till now, it was not his 100% because there was something he couldn't do with it. But when this Easter went off, you could intermarry. So now, potentially, he could give it away to another shevet. So now he has a complete ownership. And also, every Yid had connection to every part of Eretz Yisrael. So the whole of Eretz Yisrael belonged to all the Eden. Till now, every person had his chelik, and he had no connection to the other chalakim. So it's not that Eretz Yisrael was given to Klal Yisrael, to every single Yid, because he had no bailus of the others. But now that it's a possibility to, in theory, to get someone else's chelik also, so every Yid, no matter what chelik he had a connection, a potential ownership of all other chalakim. And that is called entering Eretz Yisrael, getting your share of Eretz Yisrael complete. The Rebbe says, these two things that we're talking about now, that your own share, you have the complete right over it, you could even give it away to someone else, which till then you couldn't. And the second thing, that you have a connection, a certain right over everything else that's not yours, because potentially you might get it, is al derech u'me'ein ditzvei from the Israel Eretz Yisrael. This is similar of the general explanation of the ownership of Yidden on Eretz Yisrael. That when Yidden got Eretz Yisrael, is be'efin shel Yerusha, be'efin shel Matonet. It was given to them as an inheritance. It's called like you inherit from a parent, your inheritance, and it was given to them as a present. So like this, Yerusha, you're looking at it from the point of view that you inherited. When does somebody inherit something? Was Gemar Yerusha when there are a few brothers and they inherit. So first they inherit altogether the whole estate of the father. Then they divide it, each one gets his share. So when is the real inheritance come to each person? When he gets his personal share. So in that part is the Adgosh Chelik Proti, so Hashevet Proti. That stresses the idea that similar to when there's a stroll, every Shevet, individual Shevet, got its individual Chelik. Like when you have Yerusha, and after each son gets his Chelik, that's when the Yerusha comes complete. But looking from the perspective of the fact that it's given as a present, is Adarabeh. The contrary, the Gemara says that if you give and there's a shaila how much you meant to give, we always assume you meant it in the nice way. If you give with a good eye. You give barchovat, you give in a very broad way. You don't. It's not mitzumtzim. It's not very small. As much as you could fit into that, you assume that's what happened. So b'meila, when the Eibishter gave Eden Eretz Yisrael nosan hakel, so he gave it to the best way, everything. Within Nisinis b'shleimus, it's a complete Nisina. So from that point of view, the fact you have to own the whole Eretz Yisrael. If he gave you Eretz Yisrael, you have it not only what you have your own, everything else. And therefore, be'emes, even when there was still the Isser that you cannot give your share to somebody else, or somebody else, another Shevet cannot get your share, the Snorvas Ari de Reviale. Be'emes, David should give it as a present. Really, it was something that's blocking the ability. David should made a Nisser. The lotion Ari de Reviale is a lotion that's used when you have something, and really it's yours. But let's say there's a lion standing next to it, so you can't go take it. So on one hand, you could say, well, this lack in your ownership. You can't. Ownership means I could take it when I want. Now you can't take it. On the other hand, you say, I can take it. I could. There's some outside thing that's stopping me from taking it. So Be'etzim Gab Eretz Yisrael, every Yid had a connection to the whole Eretz Yisrael. You can't take someone else's share. So that's very general. The Proti is more in detail. So in general, you have both in Yonim. In detail, as long as they were not allowed to intermarry, in order not to have a chelik from one shevet go to the other shevet, it's a lack from both sides. It's a lack in the ownership of your chelik, because something missing, you cannot really give it to somebody else, to a different shevet. So you don't have the ownership 100%, because ownership means you can do what you want with it. And also you have no connection to the share of other people, so you don't have a connection to Eretz Yisrael. When this was bottled, the Eibishter took away the din that you can't intermarry and you could give one nachla to another. That was the completion of going to Eretz Yisrael. Ubameli is moving there. We understand that the shleimus haknisel Eretz Yisrael, that when did Eden actually completely enter Eretz Yisrael? Number one, as you do the bailas b'shleimus, you have to have your ownership. Whatever you own has to be complete. And unroy lebailas via the Eden of Gans Eretz Yisrael. And the second thing, that the rest of the parts of Eretz Yisrael, which you didn't get, you also have to have some ownership. When did that happen? That these two things happen, but mainly there's a complete ownership of Eretz Yisrael in this Gala geworden, when Hutter Shvatim lo bezeh, that was revealed when the Shvatim were allowed to marry each other. So this shows that even this inyan is also connected to the inyan of the opposite of Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is the day that we went away from Eretz Yisrael, and what happened that day is that the bailas of Eretz Yisrael was given to every Yid b'shleimus. So this is the third thing. So we have the other things. The fact that the day that the Mesa Midbar, people stopped dying in the Midbar, and the day that the Harugi Better, the people who were killed in Better, were able to be buried, is connected, is the opposite of Tisha B'Av. It's the opposite of what Tisha B'Av stands for. And now that I've even explained how this other thing, that the day that the Shvatim were allowed to intermarry and you were allowed to interchange the Nachlas, is also connected to being the opposite of Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is when we were not away from Eretz Yisrael, and this is something that represents the getting Eretz Yisrael b'shleimus. Okay. Then the Rebbe goes weiter. Afal pi as chamisha dvorim miru as I was saying about Tisha B'Av, even though five bad things happened on Tisha B'Av, and the Ashton Union was Tisha B'Av, Nigzral of Essential Consulates, and the first of the five is that's the day that the Eibushter made a decree that Yidden should not enter Eretz Yisrael, the story of the Meraglim. Is over the Ika Gzeira Satan is Tisha B'Av and Zatem Churim Abayis the Rabbi. The main reason, nevertheless, of why we fast on Tisha B'Av is because of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash happened. When the Rebbe named on the Gemara, that's what the Gemara accepts. That the main reason why the biggest Chamish Osir B'Av is the biggest yontiv is Valdos is the Yem Sheposkim Liches Eitz in Marocha. The main reason is, and we said before, the fact that it was said by three people more than the other reasons means that this is the main reason. The day that they stop cutting the wood for the Marocha. Why is that the main reason? Because since we're saying that Chamish Osir B'Av is the opposite of Tisha B'Av, the main reason of Tisha B'Av is the Churban Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, what's the opposite? An inyan was a shaykh some binyan mikiriyam bias. Something has to do with the existence of the Beis Hamikdash, of the building of the Mishum. The heipach for Churban Habayis, the opposite of Churban Habayis. And the Rebbe in Order 58 even says, Bifrat, that when did it become a big yonter in the second Beis Hamikdash, which was after there was the Churban of the first Beis Hamikdash, and now they fixed it. So Chamish Osir B'Av has to be something that's against the Churban. And this is the first thing. The Churban is the first reason for Tisha B'Av. So the opposite, that being able to do things for the Beis Hamikdash, for the benefit of the Beis Hamikdash, that's the opposite, the first reason. In Churban Habayis and dot zwei inyonim. Now, when we're talking about Tisha B'Av, the Churban, two inyonim. The Churban Habayis, as in the talking Beis Hamikdash. Number one, the fact that Beis Hamikdash is destroyed. There's no Beis Hamikdash. So all the inyonim of the Aved and the Beis Hamikdash service that they did in the Beis Hamikdash is not there anymore. That's one thing. And then you have the Sibas HaChurban. The reason why was there a Churban Beis Hamikdash was the Bayis Sheni was his Chomelon for the Churban Rishon, the second Beis Hamikdash, was actually to us that's more strict because that's closer to us. So the Beis Hamikdash, the second Beis Hamikdash, what was the main reason? Is the Sibir Gevem B'Pnei Shoysa B'Sinas Chinam. This is because they had Sinas Chinam. There was no Artis, there was no Avos Yisrael. That's the reason. So Churban Beis Hamikdash represents two things, but we have no Beis Hamikdash anymore. We don't do the Aveda anymore, and also it's the reason for it, which is Sinas Chinam. Der Heipech von die zwei Unionen, and the opposite of these two Unionen, but sich aufgetan bei Chamish Osir B'Av, leiten Tam, Yem Sheposkel, Melichres Eisim Amrocha. This reason we give that they stopped cutting the wood for the Marocha represents the opposite of the two things. The opposite of not having a Beis Hamikdash, the Aveda, and the opposite of Sinas Chinam. In the Order 61, the Rebbe says, so he's trying to explain the connection of all the reasons. What about the reason that it's the day that Shevet Binyamin was allowed to marry Yidden? In that Taka, the Rebbe says, you don't see the Indian connection to the Beis Hamikdash, but you do see the second Indian of Achdus. Indian of Achdus. That now they're allowed to marry, allowed to take him back and call Indian of Achdus. So this reason, it's still connected to the Beis Hamikdash, because the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because of Sinas Chinam. And this is Achdus, so it's the opposite of Beis, but not from the reason of the Beis Hamikdash, but the reason of Achdus. Then the Rebbe adds that the Beis Hamikdash and the Mizbeach was in the chelik of Binyamin Dafke. So when we say Binyamin are allowed, it has to do with the Beis Hamikdash also be'emes, because the share that belonged to Binyamin was the one that had the Beis Hamikdash on it. But Mele, anything that has to do with taking away which bringing Binyamin back has to do with the Beis Hamikdash, because that's their chelik. And then in Order 62, the Rebbe says, what about the reason that it's the day that Hishaya ben Ola took away the blockades from going Kalil Regel? So he says, here we also have two inyonim. Number one, it's the inyon of Achdus, because going up to Yerushalayim brings Achdus. All the Yidden get together, and they all get together. Until then, they couldn't do it. So by taking away the blockades, that's connected to the inyon of Achdus. That's one thing. And also, the mitzvah Leir Legel is part of the Beis Hamikdash, because the Rambam says that the mitzvah esed to make a Beis Hamikdash is in order to have a place to bring korbanos and go up for Yontif. So going up for Yontif is part of the mitzvah of the building of the Beis Hamikdash. So when they allowed the one that took away, when they took away the blockade and they allowed them to go for Yontif, Leir Regel, is the opposite of Tisha B'Av, which is Churban Beis Hamikdash, because this brings back the Tachlis and the mitzvah of the Beis Hamikdash. Okay. So we have quite a few reasons already from that we mentioned at the beginning of the Sikha, how they fit to being the opposite of Tisha B'Av. But now, how are the other things connected to the union of the opposite, being the opposite of Tisha B'Av, and in the two things? In the Churban Beis Hamikdash itself, that we have no Beis Hamikdash, no Karbonos, no Aveda, and we don't have Sinas Chinam, that union of Artus, which is the reason for the Churban. Let us verstehen, wir haben noch a Dik in the Minyan. This will be understood by first bringing in another Dik in the Minyan. So was that the Gemara bringing the Raya? Why did the Gemara have to bring this proof? The Tanya, the Gemara says in the Braise, the Belazar God Leib, it was in the says, Mechamish Asabov, Toshash Keich Vashachamo. Mechamish Asabov, the power of the sun is weaker. They didn't cut wood for the Marocha. So it's basically, first we said that the reason why it's a special yonte because they stopped chopping wood, and the Gemara brings a Zaraya, which in the Raya you have the reason why they stopped chopping the wood, because the sun is not strong anymore. So that asks the question. In our case here, why is it important to know why they stopped? The main thing we want to know that they stopped cutting the wood, and that's a yontif, the way I explained before. Now, because of the sun, because of who cares? Why is it negay? Why does the Gemara negate to bring that the reason is because the sun stopped? Especially that makes it even harder to understand why we're so happy that the fact that they stopped cutting the wood. Why is that so happy? It's Adarabeh. They would have liked to cut the wood longer. There was no choice. The sun became weaker, so they had no choice. So by giving the reason, makes the reason for the simcha weaker. Like this, you could say there was something special that day they had to stop, something special. We're giving a reason because they had no choice. The sun was weaker and that's it. So why would they do that? Why did they want to do that? So the Hezbollah says, as he understands. So the answer is like this. This itself is the reason. The Kris says in Malacha Tuvgiton, as a Meshachol Hashanah on Mekana Makar, when they cut the wood for the Marocha and they put it away in the storage, they cut it and put it away. It's in order that the whole year they should be able to be Makar Karbonis on the Mizbeach. All kinds of karbonis. Side karbonis yochid, karbonis of an individual was yeder einer bifrada bringen lechavose, that everyone has to bring for his obligation. Okay, someone did an aveda b'shegeg, you have to bring a korban chatos or a oshram, that everyone is obligated to bring as a individual korban. Or the lenidra bendova, or a person who wants to bring a korban, an individual, his personal korban as a neder or nedova. That means a donation. And there are two types how you make the donation by designating the korban for a mizbeach, for your individual want. You want to give a neder and a dova. But all this, you needed wood. So when they chopped the wood, this was all to prepare that they should be able to bring korbanos, side korban yochet for individual, and side the korbanos sibur from Kol Yisrael, and also the korbanos of the community. Was yed ridot and zeyachedlik, and it's also for every yid, because every yid has a share in the korbanos sibur. The stutzichuf and different karbonos sibur, karbonos of the community, bring a kapara, forgiveness for certain averos, even for the individuals. And so what did the cutting of the wood mean? That they prepared that they should have enough wood for the year, that they should be able to be makriv all the karbonos for Yidden, for all Yidden, for all the individual Yidden, and for all the Yidden as a tzibur, and every individual has a connection to that too. Das heißt, the pula from Krisus Eitzim is betechna v'inyon the mitzvah from tzedakah. If you look into the cutting of the wood, what is the teich, the essence of this mitzvah tzedakah? You're helping other people. If you cut the wood now they'll bring karbonos for all the Yidden. So you're doing tzedakah, helping other Yidden. The tzedakah is as important as ways. It says it's a lotion from Tanya that it's as shokol, it's as heavy, as important as all the mitzvahs together. The Alter Rebbe says that in Yerushalmi, when it says the word mitzvah, without explaining which mitzvah means tzedakah. So that's a very big mitzvah. Especially if you do it in a very special way. In the Naora 67, the Rebbe says, one of the highest levels of giving tzedakah is that the person who gives doesn't know who's getting it, and the person who gets it doesn't know from whom is getting it. It's exactly what happened here. When in the middle of the year, somebody would come and bring a korban, they would bring the wood. He doesn't know who paid for this wood or who worked on getting this wood. The person who did it doesn't know who's going to get it. The person who got it doesn't know who gave it. So it's not just the mitzvah tzedakah, it's a mitzvah tzedakah in the highest level, one of the highest levels. But then he says, noch mera mitzvah day, that's a bigger mitzvah. Another thing, tzedakah in karbonos. It's a tzedakah, and in which inyan? In a very important inyan. It's tzedakah in karbonos. And the godless from the tzedakah is sai bekamus, and the greatness of tzedakah is in quantity. At the word getan mit jeder yochid in ganzen Klal Yisrael. Quantity meaning that this is a tzedakah for who? For everybody. for every individual, as we said before, should be able to bring a korban, and for the tzibur, for all the people together. And so the megalachim da korban karbonos hayochid da tzibur, in order to allow, to make it possible that the karbonos of the individuals, of every individual, and of the tzibur should be able to be brought. So that shows how important this mitzvah by karbonos is in quantity. And Saigadlis Beichas also in quality. And another sug tzedakah. This is another type of tzedakah, another quality of tzedakah. If you wouldn't cut the wood that time, that season, till Chamishosar Ba'ov, is noch dem mitor eitzim aroyim v'marocha. Then you don't push it, don't have the wood that you can bring a korban. So it's a certain special type of thing. You won't have any wood. There's no possibility of it, because later on you can't chop any wood, because after Chamishosar Ba'ov, the wood that you've chopped is possible. So it's not just a tzedakah. Other tzedakah someone else could give you. Here it's a tzedakah that there's no choice. You will not have anything left. So this is what the mitzvah of chopping the wood is. And what we're saying is the yontiv was that they completed this great mitzvah. One of the questions was, why is this such a special mitzvah? We said before, it's because it's a siyum. Rabbi explained, based on the Rashbam, it's the completion of a mitzvah. It's a siyum. But Rabbi asked, so why is it such a great? It's a mitzvah. So just like when you complete the sichte, you make a siyum, make a party. It's the biggest mitzvah, the biggest party. Why is it here the biggest? So he says, because here it's a gather of tzedakah, and tzedakah in the highest, as they explained the details in the highest form. The mitzvah movement, the asbore from Rabbi Lozer HaGodel, that's what that explains what the explanation of Rabbi Lozer HaGodel was. But he meant to say that we asked the guy, why did he give it? What does it negate to us the reason that the sun is weaker? Why is that negated to know? The ikir is that they finished the mitzvah, and maybe it's a siyum, etc., etc. Now we understand why. He gives the reason because the sun became weaker. And comes out is mitoken eitzim ro'il marocha. And there's no wood. If you don't chop till now enough, you will not have it. It's not the pshat, you stop chopping because some other reason. So if you have to, you'll chop later. He's giving a reason why they had to stop, and they couldn't do it later. But their meat is musber die pulak deila from krisis eitzim was wird nicht bis betes above. That explains the specialty. What's so special and great about stopping to chop the wood? That means that the mitzvah of chopping the wood was finished, came to a completion. That means this mitzvah is something that you can't do later, as we just said now. You can't afterwards. You won't be able to. How do you know you won't be able to? Because the whole reason is because the sun is weak. So as long as the sun is weak, you can't do it. And that's why this is something special. This explains this explains how this is also one of the inyanim, which is the opposite of Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is the Churban Beis Hamikdash. This is the opposite of Churban Beis Hamikdash. This is connected to the building of the Beis Hamikdash. Why? Because Binya Beis Hamikdash is as Elzayin Bayis Lashem Muchen Liyas Makrim Bekarbanos. The Rambam says that the building of the Beis Hamikdash is in order to have a place ready. And the first thing is said to have karbanis. We said before also it's a place to have aliyah l'regel, a place where you should be able to go on yontif. But the first thing that Rambam says, what's the inyan of the mitzvah of binding Beis Hamikdash? To have a place to be makam karbanis. When is this become to its shleimus that we're able to have a place for bringing karbanis on chamishas above? Was damot endik mit dem schneiden the eitzim marocha? Then you've completed the mitzvah of cutting the wood for the marocha. So then it becomes really a place which accomplishes its mission. Its mission is to bring karbonos. Now you're able to bring karbonos. That there is also there is wood enough here to bring karbonos till the next nisan when you'll start chopping again. So this makes the Beis Hamikdash into its completion of its tafkid, of its goal, of its mission, because the mission is to be able to bring karbonos. And in the order 70, the Rebbe says that in this inyan that they stopped the day they took away the blockades from going to Lil Regel, you also have both reasons. Rebbe said this is the main reason. That's why it's said by three people, main reason. But the other reason that they took away the blockades and made the ultimate regel also should be just as good. Why is the other reason, the main reason, this one about stopping to chop the wood? Why not this reason? The Rebbe says this also has both inyanim. As the Rebbe said before, with order 62, he quoted that it has both protein. It's the achdis that you're not able to go el regel, and also aliyah regel is part of what the Beis Hamikdash is for. The Rabbi says, nevertheless, the main one is the one of chopping the wood. Because in that time, the Yem Sheposkim Lichat Seitzim Baruch Hamut Geshin in Achda Hebtzim Beyeser. Because when he's in the union of Achdas is more seen in the union that they finish the mitzvah of chopping the wood, because there it makes it that other Yidden and the Tzibur could bring karbonis later, which otherwise they couldn't, because if you wouldn't chop now, they wouldn't have it and they wouldn't be able to chop. That's one thing. And also the union that connected to the base, the building of the Beis Hamikdash, it's more also because chopping wood for the marocha is something that you do. You're poshet chopping wood for the karbonis, so that's more to connect to showing your pu'ule for the Beis Hamikdash. Schenken, the day that they allowed him to go to the Egel, that he took away the blockade, he didn't do anything. He didn't force, let's say, if you push him to go, because also you're doing something to Aliyah Regel, which shows Achtis. He just said, now I'm taking away the blockade, you could go if you want to. So it's not the same as when they actually chop the wood. And besides that, the first of the two things, when the Rambam says the mitzvah of Beis Hamikdash is for two things, to have a place for karbonis and a place for Aliyah Regel. Where do you see it more? In the place of karbonis. But the bottom line is that this is a reason that has to do to being the opposite of Tisha B'Av, which is the Churban, and the reason of the Churban, which is Sinas Chinom. And by doing the mitzvah, chopping the wood, and this is the completion of the mitzvah, yeah, both has to do with the Beis Hamikdash, has to do with karbonis, that you have to bring karbonis, and that also is Achdes. You're doing it, so other people should, all the Yidden should be able to bring karbonis. If them is Meser and Menashe, now we explained everything, but now we have to understand what did Menashe add the Korali in Tabernacle. They called it the day they broke the axe. What he's trying to say is not just the fact that they added had the special name. By using this name shows a deeper inyan how this is connected to the binyan. He said that this is the opposite of Tisha B'Av, the Churban. This is the binyan. Cutting the wood to the Beis Hamikdash is the connected to the building of the good part, the building of the Beis Hamikdash, by saying that day that they finished doing it is called the Vermagel, shows even a greater shleimus. Not only, like I said before, that by chopping the wood, and we have the wood, now you could accomplish what the Beis Hamikdash is there for. The Beis Hamikdash is built in order to bring carbon, but this is more. Why? Let me explain like this. The Mishnah sagt wegen dem Iser von Giyas Barsel auf dem Mizbeach. The Mishnah says, we know there's a din that the Mizbeach was made of stones, but if a piece of metal touched the stone, it's possible. But ever that possible, if it touched stone, it becomes possible. We can be them with boinam Mizbeach. We can't build a Mizbeach. And the Mishnah gives the reason why. Shabarzel nivra lekatzu yom shlodim. Metal was created to shorten life of a person. A sword is made of metal. And the Mizbeach nivra was created l'harich yom shlodim. But the Mizbeach is made to lengthen the life of a person, to bring korbanos to get forgiven, and you shouldn't die so fast. So we see here that Barzel, metal, represents shortening the life of a person, which is the opposite of the Mizbeach. Das is the Menashe Uisen zu Meises and the Pirish Rashi by Rashbam with meaning of Tabernacle. According to Rashi and the Rashbam, that when he said Tabernacle means physically, they broke the axe. That's what he's trying to tell us. Shviras Hagarzel and Shalbarzel, they broke the axes, the axe that was made, that was made of metal. That Ilu von Tesva Bob and Korf Postka Malichas Eitzel Mamrocha, this Mile, the specialty of Chamishosar Bob, that they finished the mitzvah of cutting wood for the Marocha, it's not only, as we said till now, it's a great thing, and it's Abbas Yisrael and everything else, but after all, it's not part of the mitzvah of the korban, of the Beis Hamikdash. It's only in order to bring karbonos, you have to have wood, so you have to chop wood. So he says, this is what he's telling, it's not only part of a hechsher mitzvah, preparation for a mitzvah, but the Farat man the Magal need genutzt of a tashmish chel in his bottle. That's why they couldn't use it, because they used it till now for a mitzvah and they didn't want to use it, but it was only used as a hechsher mitzvah. So they didn't want to use it for secular things, and it's bottle. Nobody said more. Now, fila need blaze in them was betechnet das a mitzvah dele von tzedakah. And he wants to say it's even more than what we said before, that it's be'etzem the teichen of this mitzvah of chopping wood is a mitzvah of tzedakah. And it's a house now that it's ready. You could bring karbonos because you have the wood. So all that, it's more than that. So Nashe says, this day brought out the tachlis of why you have a Beis Hamikdash and why you have karbonos. Das was the Mizbeach is nivra l'harich yom shalodam adei karbonos all of this, that The bringing of karbonis is made, it says the Mizbeach, which you bring karbonis, is made to lengthen the years of a person, means lengthen his life. So this inyan hat sich aufgetan, ausgedrückt in dem Tag, when did it express itself? In that day, when they finished the mitzvah, they completed the mitzvah, after they completed cutting the wood. Even before they actually used this wood for karbonis on the marocha, which is the alateg business and all the days does nissen. That day itself, there was something that expressed what karbonis are for in connection to cutting the wood. They chopped the wood and they finished the mitzvah, which is a great yontif. And what did they do then? In the tavar magel, nishbar akadumis, they broke the metal axe, the metal sickle. That on that day already, they caused we change and we break the opposite of the karbonis of the mizbeach. Barzel, what is niver lekatzel yomashlo. The barzel metal represents the shortening of the life. The mizbeach, the bisamidash, represents the lengthening. So that day, when they completed the mitzvah, and the mitzvah is for karbonis, so really it's the mitzvah is for having the wood later, for bringing the karbonis later. But that day they did something to show that what we're doing now is the opposite of not having a mizbeach. Not having a mizbeach means not being able to lengthen the life of a person. Breaking the metal showed this nakuda, what the mizbeach stands for. This is part of what the mizbeach stands for. So they actually broke it. The question was, why did they break it? Even if it's not baltashkis, what was the purpose of breaking it? They did it for that same reason. The Rebbe says, Nora 75, B'meila ein b'zeh mishu baltashkis. B'meila, it's not baltashkis. Because baltashkis is only only if you break it for destruction. But if you take it for a good reason, you're allowed to. Here they broke it to prove, not to bring out the nakuda of breaking the barzel. Breaking the barzel is similar to bringing karbonis on the mizbeach, because he couldn't touch it with barzel because mizbeach is to lengthen the life of a person, and this was the opposite. That's why they actually broke it. Since now you can't use it, it can't help you cutting wood for the mizbeach, because you can't chop the wood anymore. So what remains now? The connection of this axe to the mizbeach is not there anymore. So what remains now? What's it created for? Like the Loshen and the Chazal, it was created lekatzer yom of shlodom. Niver lekatzer yom is created. So the concept of barzel is to shorten. The Rabbi is minaro yom is all this mevatel zayin to brechen. Therefore, it's kedai. It's right to break the barzel. So that's why this is the addition of Rabbi Menashe saying that not only is this special day that had all the milas of finished with the mitzvah, we completed the mitzvah of making all the things that he said before, they did something else to it. That not only what's because you have the wood for later, it's special. And like we said before, this on that day itself, right away, they did something which brings out the point of what the mizbeach is for. Now, as they're taken from the yontech and shosabov is the reading now based on what I said before, that the contents of the yontech of Chamishosabov is the Achdes, the unity amongst Yidden, which is the Heper, the opposite, and it is a tikkun and the bittul of Sinas Chinam. It fixes the problem of why there was a churban Sinas Chinam, was his given the Chsipis Churban, which is the reason for churban. Now that we said that, at Chamishosabov is the complete opposite of the churban. His movement was the yontev of Simcha and Tezbavov is bestanden in them. Now we understand what it says in the Gemara, that how do they celebrate the Yontif of Chamishosar B'Av in them was B'nei Yerushalayim Yitzis V'Chedes B'Kramim, that the daughters of Yerushalayim would go out and dance in a circle in the vineyards, which means, and it says what they said, and they each one borrowed clothes from somebody under. As nit gucken, die verschiedene Chiluken zwischen sie. First of all, they all danced together. Means that even though, despite the fact that there are different. There were some, the Gemara goes into the details, each group said, there were groups, there were yafyafiyas, there were beautiful women. Yuchoses, those that have a special yiches. Muchores, those that are not nice. The Braise rechant us weiter, as the Braise says. But, gehen ze Allah, in ein mochel, they all go in the same dance, in the same circle, b'sholem Ardes. So that's why, since the Chamishosabov represents Ardes, so they celebrated that through showing Ardes. When Nachman goes further, it says they were there all dressed in white, no decoration, they should all be alike. No one should be fancier than the other. And also shulim. Each one had to borrow, because some people had clothes. Some people didn't have, they would have to borrow, so they would be embarrassed. So everyone had to borrow. And how do they borrow? The Gemara is Mamshech and Mafaret Meseder. The Gemara gives the order that each level had to borrow from one lower. Bas Melech, She'elis, and Bas Kein Gadol. The princess, the daughter of the king, would borrow the clothes from the daughter of the Kein Gadol. Bas Kein Gadol with Bas Kan. The daughter of the Kein Gadol from the daughter of the second in command of the Kein Gadol. What does that mean? Why did they do that? This brings out even more how the Achdus amongst the Yidden, among these women, was so much so that the one that belongs to a more important category is she'elis, would borrow. Borrow means she'elis also means bet, to ask. Would bet, lie, ask and borrow. When you sich machnia or mekabel from them was belonged to asug yes or no. When you borrow something from somebody, you're machnia yourself, you lower yourself. Please help me. I need something. That's what they did. He had to show that as much as she's in a higher level, but at this time she lowers herself and borrows from the lower level to show that we're all the same. When in themselves, so that's why the Mesichta finishes off with this inyan, the Chamishos above, they danced in such a way and they borrowed the clothes. And then themselves inyan is the same Mesichta. The real end of the Mesichta is the same inyan. What does it say then? Also, like Hakadosh Baruch Hu lasses mochel tzadikim, Davish in the future is going to make a dance, a circle for the tzadikim. V'yeshev b'nei in the Gan Eden, and Davish is going to sit in the middle amongst them in Gan Eden. And each one is able to point with the finger on Davish. It says v'omar b'yemahu. That day they're going to, each one's going to be able to say Zeh Elokeinu, this is God. They're able to see Elokus, which means demelt would sein the shleimus achdus v'skalos finalin. Then there will be the complete achdus, unity, and hiskalos combination, connection of all the Yidden. The Lashon here is that Eibishter will make this circle for the tzaddikim. Amakulan tzaddikim. All the Yidden are called tzaddikim. It'll all be zusammen, be together. Like the Rebbe says, he explains in Chedek Yutes with the Siches how this, what will be lost love in this circle, they should be there. Rebbe explains it there. It shows the real Achdus, and it's all connected to Chamish Asar B'Av, which is the real Achdus, the opposite of Tisha B'Av. And on that day, from Losid Love and Mashiach will come, but Zayin that Tavra Magal b'chol Elam Kulei. This breaking of the axe, breaking of the sickle, breaking of the metal, because metal represents killing, shortening the life of a person. So that day, meaning Mashiach will come, the whole world will have this concept of Tavra Magal. He said Tavra Magal means to break away the union of shortening the life of a person, of fighting wars. Why? Because it says what's going to happen is that the swords will be transformed into shovels for planting, plowing. No nations will fight with each other. And this concept that we said before by the Mezbeach, which is to lengthen the life of a person, which is Atem Kriyin Odom, Yidden are called Odom, so it goes on Yidden, means Arichas Yomim Vishonim, that there will be, the Magal will be broken, the Barzel, which shortens the person's life, will be broken, there will be no more swords and things like that, because won't be any shortening of a life, and there will be Arichas Yomim Vishonim, there will be Laharich, like the Mizbeach is to lengthen the life of a person, will have Arichas Yomim Vishonim, long life in days and years, in the Zman from Tchias HaMesim, the time of Tchias HaMesim, will have a long life forever. By Kol Yisrael, all the Yidden will be in that level, because Kol Yisrael, Yeshlam Chelik Leilam Abba, all the Yidden have a Chelik in the Leilam Abba. It says, Va'amich Kulam Tzadikim, they're all Tzadikim. As alle Yidden, in the Mochel Tzadikim, was Oshin HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, all the Yidden will participate in this dance, the circle that the Eibishter will make for Tzadikim. All the Yidden will be part of it, it'll be the real Achdus, and this should happen B'mheiro, the Yomeinu Mamish, soon, very soon in our days, Mamish.